Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to the webinar. Good morning, California. Good afternoon, Europe, and then also special hello to the folks joining, if anyone's joining from Singapore and Asia. I was there last week, actually, where IBM had some special news to announce that we'll talk about in a second. So we're going to be talking today about the ROI of the remote design thinking. And we have two great people to be able to talk about that today, as long as I can. There we go. So Joni Saylor, I've known Joni for probably 4 years now. Joni is a design principal at IBM, but most importantly, she's in charge of teaching, observing, evolving, how design thinking and collaboration is being spread across a huge organization, a huge leading organization. And again, she's been there almost from the beginning, right, Joni?
That's right, yeah.
This new transformation. And then we have Dean Davison, principal consultant at Forrester, who's, again, long career working with CIOs in different continents, understanding their needs, understanding different tools, different products, different services, and the impact that they bring to the business to modernize how people work. So, hello, Dean. Thanks for coming over and for sharing your research in a bit.
Thanks.
So, today we're going to be talking a little bit about the transformation that IBM is going through, and especially focus a little more on the global and remote work that needed to be happening in order for that to be achieved. So we're going to be live tweeting on hashtag remote design. You can always follow us at Mural. And then we are also going to be having some time for Q&A. So remember to post your questions in the Q&A section of the webinar software. So with that introduction, again, we'll be sharing the report along the presentation, and there's a link also along the way for a downloadable version of it for you to digest heavily later on. But now we're going to be having, again, an actress, part of this transformation, and then Dina, someone that has interviewed folks separately on how they are deploying their tools. So Joni, it's on you. I need to give you control to, all right. I'm sorry about this, but here, remote control, Joni. Okay, Joni, you're ready to go. So kick it off.
Awesome. Well, hello, everybody. And thanks so much, Mariano, for having me. It's awesome to get a chance to talk about what we've been up to here at IBM. So I thought I'd just kind of set the stage, sharing a bit about the journey that we've been on and kind of situate that in the context of remoteness and remote work to get us started. So I'm in Austin, Texas, which is where our flagship design studio is in IBM. Behind me, there are just teams and teams of designers in our building. We're covering 3 or 4 floors now with about 400 designers here in Austin, which is awesome. And this has happened in a pretty short amount of time. So just to give you sort of a backdrop here, IBM, you know, our scale is almost unfathomable in some ways. So there's 380,000 people working at IBM today. We're situated in 175 countries around the world. So very, very global, highly dispersed teams everywhere. It's normal in IBM to be on a team that's got, you know, 100 or so people. A small team in IBM is about 50 people. So when you think about the kinds of issues that come up with in terms of, you know, being able to work quickly, being able to respond to market demands quickly, and being able to align many disciplines and perspectives at teams at that scale, you can imagine that we need some help to do that. And so on top of those numbers, think about IBM as a really fascinating company, actually. 106 years old, been around quite some time, seen its way through many different technology and societal changes, right? So if you think about when IBM got started, IBM started making clocks and meat slicers. We moved into more data and systems, and I've always revolved around the world of work. Has been a constant theme for IBM. And if we look into our past as designers and we see these beautiful examples, especially from about the middle of last century, we see beautiful examples of design getting into the market and, making connections between the company and our end users, right? So, IBM is known for having had a really exceptional design program in the 60s. One of the first corporate design programs was formed at IBM. So this is Paul Rand, just an iconic visual and graphic designer and communicator. He honored the company with a symbol of our logo and like gorgeous expression of it that we still love. We still kind of rally around this even today. And so, I share that just to sort of show that, the passion for design and designers at IBM. If we're honest with ourselves, towards the end of the last century, that was, we sort of lost our way with respect to design. We weren't as focused in on the ways that we can meet the needs and wants of our end users, and we weren't as focused in on the craft of design and how to bring designers and design thinking into teams. So, in 2012, Jenny Rometty, this is our CEO, she was pretty fresh on the job. And one of the very first things that she said strategically to the whole company was that the key to our growth, the key to the future for IBM's growth is going to be on the client experience. So that was a powerful statement, and really led us to start thinking through what are the ways that, as we look back, what are the ways that we can rebuild and sustain a culture of design at IBM. So that's what our program has set out to do over the last few years. When we think about just sort of the words that were in the air at the time, we were wanting to move from a culture that was somewhat, coming from our manufacturing past, right? Kind of hierarchical waterfall approaches, very technology and solutions focused, processes focused, issues with silos and sort of rallying the company around particular needs of end users to, this new world where we need to be very people focused, and we need to bring the skills and abilities of many disciplines into teams and rally that around market opportunities quickly. This is just a dramatic shift, right? And so as we started to sort of think through what are the ways that we can get from here to there, right, from the as is to the future, we started thinking about this as this is somewhat like any other design problem, right? You sort of examine where you are and you figure out where you want to go, and then you start to devise courses of action to get there, right? So we have just exceptional design leadership at IBM. Our general manager, Phil Gilbert, gave us this really, really effective strategy to thinking through what are the ways that we can devise a culture that cares, that is very focused on outcomes, and what are kind of the levers that we can pull as a company and as a team to get us there, right? So we started, people, practices plus places is what's going to get us to our outcomes. And we started, hiring. We're kind of, our program's known, I think, for having hired many designers over the last several years. Today, when we started out, we had about 200 designers in the company. Today, we're over 1,600 designers. They are, embedded into teams, which is a central part of the way that we have structured our program, because the purpose for them being here is not to sort of, imagine innovative concepts on the side, but as an agency, but to embed into teams and embed into the workflow so that we get differentiated and human-centered outcomes into the market quickly. So these are designers who are really working with, it's essential that they be working with their interdisciplinary teammates, right? They're out in the field, they're learning domains that, are often sort of brand new spaces to designers. So this is a team out doing some observational research with educators for a Watson for Education project for teachers. Where the designers are working in complex domains like systems administration, cyber security, quantum, and healthcare. These are, like I said, these are domains where designers, there's not going to be one lone genius designer who's going to sort of drop into these domains and change the world. This is going to be to advance our projects and help our users advance their own work. It's going to take interdisciplinary teams to get that done. And so, when we talk about there being 1,600 designers at IBM, it sounds really big. But when you think back to that first number I shared, it's really just a little skinny slice of the company, right? And so it's so important that our program and our people be really focused on the ways that they can bring others into the workflow. And so, this is like a humbling little chart, right? It really demonstrates the need for, when we were putting our program together, we really needed a way to make our program not just about designers, to make it about the whole company and how we could come together to change ultimately. And so when we talk about practices, we've introduced several new practices into the company. I think one of the most transformational for us has been design thinking and research. And so we see this as this is not a practice that's for designers sort of alone in their studio spaces. This is design thinking is becoming a 21st century business skill for all professionals. And so as we kind of look at that trend and look at the effectiveness of design thinking and the tactics underneath it, we see a lot of potential for it to really help us get from sort of here to there. And so, we started out in the company, I'll just share quickly, we started out using kind of the traditional approach to design thinking, where you've got kind of a linear model of, I'm going to first understand, then I'm going to define a problem space, then I'm going to come up with brilliant ideas, we're going to prototype, test, done. Something we found there is that this just didn't fit into a continuous delivery context. And so we started really working to redefine the way that IBMers think about what design thinking is, and especially to sort of take the processy components away from it. And so we started to focus IBMers on 3 principles to get started. So focusing us on end user outcomes was huge. Just really giving everyone that lens that ultimately what we're going for is end user outcomes. We're going to need to rally diverse and empowered teams around the problems and the pain that we find. And, we're going to have to switch to this model of continuously delivering, not delivering in a linear way over years, but delivering continuously in the span of months and weeks often. And so we introduced this concept that, and it really helped our teams to start to get it, that, and everyone outside, in and outside of design, can see themselves in kind of this never-ending cycle, really, of that we're all in. When we think about innovation and bringing new concepts into the world, we observe the world, we look for opportunities, we reflect together on those opportunities, we think through how do we want to kind of show up in the world, and then we make. And so, I won't go too far into sort of our approach to design thinking, but, I'll point out that, there's a place for teaming and there's a place for, virtual collaboration as well as in-person collaboration, and a need for it throughout every bit of this approach, right? And so I think it's interesting if you think about the workshop, the typical sort of workshop or education setting that you might find in IBM or even outside of IBM, you kind of imagine a bunch of designers sort of like working in their little space or whatever. We're bringing large teams into collaborative settings, both virtually and physically. And the thing I love about this session, this is a big reflection for a team, is that you really can't tell who the designers are in this image. It's a mix of engineering and designers and salespeople and marketing folks. And I think, as we that to us, that's a sign of success, that we've got all of those different disciplines in the room. And so we're prototyping together. We're prototyping in code. Making can happen in any realm. And so anyway, I'll kind of wrap up this discussion of our design thinking just with some thought about outcomes, because that's, like I said at the top, that's what we're in this for, right? So our GM, Phil Gilbert, has a great saying that he likes to bring out, which is that a business doesn't really care about design thinking. And it's easy for us to get all wrapped up in design thinking and processy about it and kind of fetishize the process of design thinking. But in the end, our business, we can only care about market outcomes. And so we do a lot to make sure that that's all we talk about is market outcomes. I want to share just really quickly some news from Forrester. That we just had a really excellent total economic impact study completed by Forrester. It's a bit different from the one that Dean's going to share today, but I thought it would be interesting for people to kind of check out just this contrast between, sort of trying to understand the economic impact of design thinking itself as a process and as an approach versus remote design thinking and the benefits that brings. And so Forrester just completed this rigorous DEI study for us, and they surveyed 60 senior executives from Fortune 1000 sized enterprises, and they conducted a bunch of interviews with IBM clients from around the world. And really what they found here is that the combination of designers in deep collaboration with their teammates through human-centered design thinking is making a difference for us. And we now have, we were suspecting this obviously and kind of banking on it in our program for some time, but now we have, through their leadership, we have, much more rigorous evidence for that. So getting to market 2 times faster. Oh.
Yeah, and Joni, what I was saying is like, this is great first step in any company going through transformations, like measuring or having a hypothesis of where they're going to be in a year or 2 years from now, if they get more nimble in how they go to market, both from the, again, understanding the problems and coming up with solutions, and also delivering continuously. And then, as we'll see in Dean's report, in a way for remote teams and global teams, we help catalyze that, right? And it was an unmeasurable benefit that we had in our report. But the nice thing is that now it can be attached to this one, and again, realize some, at least, of these benefits by deploying a remote infrastructure to practice this kind of work. So it comes super handy and super timely as a prequel to our study.
Yeah. Oh, good. Okay, cool. I thought you almost can't have this conversation one without the other. So I thought it would be interesting for everybody to check it out. But I won't go too far into this, because we'll share a link to it if folks are interested. But just, kind of digging into that 2 times faster to market, that's that's very good news for designers and for design thinking, right? I think, when you try to introduce a new way of working, it's understandably kind of stressful for teams, and stressful for teams that have been together and working in a different way. And so, of course, one of the things that, any experienced designer or design thinker has been through is sort of trying to introduce new ways of doing research and understanding users, and hearing, well, we don't really have time for that, because, we're on a schedule here and we've got to get this thing out. But what the insights from this report make clear is that whole team alignment early in the process on what value can be delivered for users speeds things up. So that's awesome to be able to understand that the connection there more deeply. So I'll just share a couple of quotes from the report itself. But one thing I think that was really interesting is that Forrester is determining that teams that are applying design thinking are staffed with designers and design thinkers, they're seeing up to a 75% reduction in design and development time. That's amazing. So this is a quote from one of our health and human services CIO clients talking about how, what used to take 6 or 8 months is now taking 3 or 4 months, right? And so one of the things they saw was that the number of defects in their software product were slashed by about 50%, over 50%. just because they were using design thinking. They were especially very focused on their user and how to serve. And then I'll just wrap up with this idea. Oh, I think it didn't advance. There's the quote there. But just want to wrap with this last thought for us, that as we've sort of, as a company's come to be known as design thinkers, and not just our designers, but in the way that we are interacting with our clients, what we're seeing is that clients take note of that, right? They don't want any vendor to show up with solutions and sort of trying to push concepts or pre-existing whatever's on the truck with them. So, our clients are really appreciating that we're starting from a place of trying to understand what they really need. So I'll share one other quick set of stats as I know we're wanting to move along, but internally, something that we've seen is that our own teams are able to find deeper opportunities, understand more deeply what opportunities are available, and that are where our clients are really thinking about. So I'll stop there and talk a bit about places. So we talked about people and designers. We talked about practices and bringing design thinking into our work. And the last really important piece there is places, and this idea that if we're going to be successful, if we're going to win, we need to create spaces, physical and virtual, that fuel new kinds of collaboration.
And Joni, quick thing here. I met with Phil 4 years ago, and he already had this program in motion, but he already had someone working on the virtual studios capability, because again, he understood that it was like a big transformation, started with a sliver of people in a global footprint, right? So he knew from the beginning that he had to scale digitally, and the CIO organization then supported you guys pretty well with a pretty good tooling program. But again,
right.
Go ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, thank you, Mariano. That's awesome. So I'll just share that we've, since our program started, we've opened 44 design studios around the world, which sounds like a lot again, but when we're in that many countries, we all in 175 countries, we need more than just studio spaces where the designers are situated with their teams. We need a way to really connect beyond that. And for us, that's where the tools and tooling like Mural really come into play. There's an obvious need to sort of connect the workflow between all of these interconnected teams. It's there. I can't think of a team in IBM that doesn't have some either remote component, one or usually more than one person kind of off in another city or another country, and so it's essential. And then the other thing with respect to bringing tooling in is just this idea that design thinking can be perceived as sort of something you do when you're in a workshop. And so I think, even more than just the concept of kind of virtual spaces in the abstract, what we needed was a way to get the great thinking and teaming that was happening in our workshop settings into the everyday workflow, right? So if you've been in a really transformative design thinking session with your team or led other teams through one, that these moments of alignment when you're in person in a workshop setting can be huge pivot points for a team. But we can't all be in a workshop all the time, right? We sort of go back to our desks. We go back to the day-to-day, and we've got to deliver together. And so kind of like, how do you bridge that gap between those two worlds? And so for us, we put together, and I think that's what you're referring to earlier, Mariano, is a program that we called Whitewater, with the idea being that this is all about teaming, and we're kind of all in the raft together, navigating. And, we pulled together 3 really essential tools to help our teams, deliver in the day-to-day: GitHub Enterprise, Slack, and Mural. And the combination of these has been amazing for us. So I'll just, kind of run through some of the usage that we see. We see teams using Mural for any number of things. It can be planning a workshop, synthesizing research, and analyzing insights. It can be, putting together mood boards to really think through what's the future of our brand and our. It can be, this is a workshop from my team where we were really just planning out, okay, how much time, what do we want our focus to be as individuals? How can we, plan our team progress? Any number of, it's such a flexible way for all of us to kind of get into a setting together and really kind of roll up our sleeves and get to work.
And then there's all of the agile use cases also that we've shared in another webinar with user story mapping and the integration with GitHub, integration with Jira to keep the loop going. Yeah.
Okay, so I thought I'll just share real quickly a couple of things that we've learned using Mural and some of the benefits that we've seen from it. So first of all, just like design thinking and just like our approach to teaming and to moving quickly, Mural as a tool is for the whole team. It's not just for designers. And so that's something that we had to really stress at the beginning, that because it sort of looks designery and kind of
colors.
Yeah.
And we asked
so,
them like what they like about Mural and say like, well, it's not gray.
Yeah. And so I'll share just the biggest lesson that we learned when we started to use Mural. And hopefully all of your users out there have learned this one and have moved past it. But just this idea that, as a team, we can maybe set up a quick activity or discussion board in Mural and just kind of like send it out into the ether. Hey, can you check out this Mural and leave your comments when you get a chance? We found out that it almost never works, right? That people don't get a chance, right? So what we pivoted to is this approach where we're much more intentional when we set up Mural sessions. We put the same thought and care into it as putting together a workshop or an education experience or a team session. So I thought I'll plug a previous session that you all held on kind of best practices in remote collaboration. This is from Jordan Sherry. She's an awesome designer at IBM, and she really laid it down, kind of like, how do you run a session as a facilitator and put the level of care into the work. She's got kind of little tips and tricks in here in terms of just getting people active and getting people used to using the tool, defining areas in the Mural where you're going to be moving through a set of conversations that are pretty pre-planned, just like you would in a workshopping or a teaming situation, and just really thinking through it as a facilitator. So, oh, there's Jordan. She's the best. And so I'll just close with this idea that for us, design and design thinking, embedding that into the company, embedding it into everything that we are doing and delivering and into the team's workflow is essential. And that's where Mural really fits in for us, is that it's become a way to bring those practices directly into our workflow. So we've known for years of using Mural and of working in this way that we knew there were benefits to this. We knew that we were getting return on it. We kind of feel it, and now we have through what Dean is about to share, we have evidence that this way of working is really helping us transform our business.
Yeah, and thank you for this comment, because definitely right now we have like over 25,000 monthly active users from IBM. So again, the math there, designers doesn't add up, right? So we have a lot of people in engineering, a lot of people in product marketing, but also a lot of folks in sales and pre-sales, working with clients, discovering problems and so forth. But again, this hunch that we had, we also wanted to validate it at this scale. We knew that we could do an impact report, and we believe that we enable and we accelerate this cultural transformation that you guys kicked off by enabling global teams to feel closer together. But we didn't, as I said, like similarly to how you had the hunch on design thinking as a transformation, we had that hunch, but we are starting to get some empirical evidence. And we wanted to bring in someone that understood customer experience, understood collaboration, and tooling. And again, we saw in Forrester that they were paying attention to this topic. So we wanted to, I mean, independent and objective party to do an evaluation. And that's where we asked Forrester to do their study. And again, and that's where we met Dean, and again, thankfully, a lot of IBMers shared their time to go through the interviews and the deep analysis that Dean did. So, Dean, would you share a little more about what you found out through the interviews with people?
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. And thanks, Mariano and Joni. I love that story. My name is Dean Davison. I'm with Forrester Consulting. And as Mariano said, the Mural story is really compelling. And so what he was looking for was some external validation. And so Forrester came in and conducted what we call a total economic impact study. And I'm going to share with you what that is and explain how this study is a little bit different than the one that Joni just talked about, because they are parallel, they do complement each other, but they are distinct. Then we'll talk about what some of the insights are that Forrester discovered from interviewing IBM executives, and that included Joni, but also a host of other people who work in different types of organizations and places within IBM, so that we can see the way the impact affects different business units or different sectors of the operations. And then I'll share with you the math. How did we actually do the calculations? I do want to emphasize that this is an abbreviated version of the results of a more comprehensive study. And Mariano, I believe, is posting a link, or will make a link available to you, of that more comprehensive study. The reason that's important is because this analysis is not just done to look at IBM. As multiple people, both Mariano and Joni, have indicated already today, the scale of IBM is astronomical compared to many other organizations, and probably compared to many of you who might have a handful of design thinking or design professionals rather than a building full. And so as we try to look at that scale, we want to make sure that you can apply the results of this to your operation and your circumstances. First of all, what a total economic impact study is an examination of the benefits, both direct and indirect. So direct would be something that you can actually cross off your balance sheet or off of your income statement, something that actually saves you money. An indirect benefit would be something such as an impact on productivity or performance. We also look at costs, both direct and indirect. We also look at concepts like flexibility. What is the organization starting to think about? What is it able to do a year, or 2 years, or 3 years down the road that simply would have been impossible if it hadn't already made the choice to adopt a product, in this case, Mural? And then we risk adjust everything. For those of you who work extensively with people in the financial sector, you know that CFOs are very careful today, because there are so many projects, so many tools fail to realize or live up to the expected benefit. And so CFOs have become fairly demanding of looking at business cases. And so Forrester builds in a risk adjustment to the variables. And we call that the total economic impact. The process we go through, and this is important because I want you to really understand the independence and objectivity here, is we spend a little bit of time doing some due diligence. In this case, Forrester spoke with Mural. Forrester certainly has some opinions and points of view into design thinking and customer experience work. We work with a number of different companies around the world, and we didn't want to impose our own preconceived notions upon this relationship that Mural and IBM have with each other. So we did some due diligence, and then we interviewed a number of different executives at IBM, built a financial model, and built a case study. We also do this type of work for a number of different activities across the industry. As Joni indicated, at the same time we were doing this study about the impact Mural has on an organization as a digital tool for design thinking programs, Forrester was also working with IBM on the flip side, just to look at what is the impact of design thinking on an organization like IBM. So even though the studies were two distinct activities and they were managed by different teams within Forrester, we did communicate and we tried to keep them as distinct as we could for the purity of the research. But we also are aware that they complement each other and were happening at the same time. But we do similar studies like this for hardware and software companies and services entities around the world. Lastly, I want to just emphasize that Forrester is independent and objective. And yes, Mural and Mariano introduced us to their customers at IBM, and we did interview those people at IBM, but Mural was not involved. And Forrester takes complete responsibility for the analysis, and in no way does this study imply any type of an endorsement of either Mural or IBM. So just for the record. So now let's actually talk about the content. So what did we find? What did we discover? Well, before Mural, IBM executives told us that they managed design thinking, as Joni indicated, in the traditional way, getting a bunch of people in a room with whiteboards and post-it notes all over the place, and basically using live facilitators to sort of run a design session. What some of these people indicated is as they started using a tool like Mural, they were able to take a more structured approach to design sessions. They couldn't just get everybody in a room and sort of walk through a process. Now they had to break down the process into pieces and chunks, engage with people for shorter periods of time, because it's harder to stay to concentrate and focus when you're staring at a screen as opposed to when you're in a room. And so they would break sessions up into time, and that had both benefits and drawbacks. Some of the benefits were that it allowed people who were participants to not be so focused on something all day long that they sort of became brain dead or numb from the conversation. It also, though, allowed those people to sort of go back and do their day job for a day or two, and then come back maybe to another 4-hour session that was a few days later and have fresh thoughts and have a fresh perspective that they were able to bring in. So it sort of broke up the design session. And one of the reasons for that that'll become obvious here in a few minutes is that you didn't have to pay the travel costs. People didn't have to be in one place. And so it allowed them to break it up in ways that previously wouldn't have been cost effective or feasible. So Forrester did all of this analysis, and we came up and we did the math, and I'm going to show you all of this math here in just a few minutes, but we did realize that the ROI just from using Mural for IBM was a staggering, by the way, 495% ROI. Now, you remember Joni showed you a few minutes ago a 300% ROI. Those are two distinct numbers. Joni showed you just the value that IBM is getting from design thinking programs. This ROI is focused on just the value that it brought to the table of using Mural. So again, two distinct numbers, and I want to make sure that we draw a fair delineation between them. The payback from using Mural was less than 6 months. In other words, very rapid in today's world. And so IBM, I can't tell you, I haven't heard endorsements that were this strong as I heard from IBM for Mural in a long time, because it fundamentally enabled new capabilities. In fact, some of those things is that what the IBM people told us is before they started using Mural, when they did everything in a room like the pictures Joni showed, some of the things that they struggled with or the things that they wanted to try to achieve was they wanted to try to equalize the voices of all participants. And one of the statements was, it's hard to check or set aside traditional team hierarchies at the door. An executive VP outside is still an executive VP in a design room. And in many cases, there are people who are hesitant to contradict or challenge or discuss, even though it's supposed to be a free-form flow, room for free flow of ideas. Another challenge was getting contributors together. Just getting people in the same room took a lot of time and a lot of planning and a lot of travel. And so that was a challenge. Also, IBM was trying to reduce the reliance on multi-day sessions because, in simple words, they sort of got in the way sometimes of their day jobs, of doing the regular work that, as Joni said, the purpose of design thinking isn't design thinking, it's the outcome. And the people are still responsible for delivering the outcomes. So the key results, what they found by using a digital platform, the Mural's digital platform was, one, it helped accelerate and enable this change in company culture that IBM was looking for. It helped streamline design thinking workshops. It allowed them to be more timely, to turn things around faster, because they didn't have to schedule 3 months in advance to have people in one room for people who had busy schedules. And it actually allowed them to increase the quality because it was more timely and relevant. And of course, faster results. They were able to get things done and identify and turn things around more rapidly. And as Joni indicated, time to market for these results is sometimes becoming key to whether you can be competitive in your marketplace. A couple of quotes for you. One is from Phil Gilbert, who's the general manager of this practice. He says, using Mural was like night and day for design work. Normally, it's difficult to get everybody with the right expertise from different groups in various countries on the same page and working together real time. The savings was especially significant at the beginning of a project where we do a lot of building definitions and conceptual thinking. So again, a fairly strong endorsement. Now, that's a very high-level endorsement. Kind of a conceptual of design thinking. The quote to the right is very specific and talks about design thinking in an area that was important to the IBM study, but one that we haven't talked about at all yet on this call, and that is in the IT organization in helping facilitate agile work, and teams for development teams. So again, a very specific use case to the IBM go-to-market engine, and something that isn't even customer-facing. But he said, but Conrad Lagarde said, we thought that doing co-creation work would be better with everyone sitting in the same room, but that requires time and travel. Using Mural allowed us to co-create more quickly and keep our agile momentum rolling without delays or increases in costs. It accelerated the speed of getting to the outcome and getting through the exercise faster than in the past. So I think it's important that we talk about the different use cases. And while we've been talking about it generally, there are some very specific examples and ways that the math comes out. So as we look specifically at the results, what did Forrester measure? We were able to ascertain 3 different categories of results. One is the ability to accelerate results. Another is ways that using Mural provided cost savings. And lastly, that it measured and increased the productivity of the people working on these activities for IBM. So the first thing was accelerating results. As indicated a little bit to date in this deck, using a digital platform as Mural, it helped IBM change the culture because it was simpler and easier, and more people inside IBM were able to get involved in design thinking. Again, it took the focus away from these subgroups of people who had to sort of learn both to facilitate and participate in formal workshops, and it allowed the idea generation to be broken down into components that required less of a learning curve for people who were not design professionals, but who were product managers or agile developers, and allowed them to get involved without necessarily going up the learning curve of being a participant. The second benefit of helping it change the culture at IBM was it helped IBM scale design thinking. Now, we've talked about IBM and its 380,000 employees and how that is just astronomical compared to many of us in the world and the organizations we work for. But using a digital platform, according to IBM, helped them scale. And lastly, the IBM helped scale because it increased the pace, as I said earlier, about them being able to run sessions more frequently. The whole time scale of getting planning sessions, coordinating travel, actual traveling, and so forth was reduced. And so the first benefit that they really realized was the ability to accelerate results. The second benefit, and this is one where we have some specific numbers associated with it, and this is one where, again, I give you as much detail as is possible so that you can apply this to your situation. What IBM told us is that on average, using Mural, they were able to avoid 2 people who would have otherwise had to travel to a design session. The average travel for these individuals was about $1,200. In addition, facilitating a live session cost about $400. That was, of course, Post-it notes. Of course, the people at 3M must love the design thinking trend. But Post-it notes and markers, which is fairly trivial, but catering, lunches, and sometimes, in some cases, renting facilities or rooms where you may not have had company facilities to do that. In IBM's case, those things averaged about $400 per session. Now, this is where the scale becomes important. IBM, on average, over 3 years, was running 3,275 sessions per year. Again, an astronomical number, but what you can do is plug in the numbers for your organization. If you're running 50 sessions or 100 sessions, you can scale back this number and still apply it to what your organization would be able to save in just avoiding the travel costs of sessions. Another benefit that we measured that had specific financial attributes to it is again the one I shared about the productivity of the project development teams, largely due to agile development in the IT organization. I shared with you a quote from Conrad a little earlier, but basically they were able to bring these teams together. One of the areas that they specifically mentioned was that
we're still seeing the reduced cost of travel slide.
Okay.
There you go.
Thank you, Mariano. There we go. That they were able to reduce the root cause analysis and postmortem. That this agile team was able to be more responsive to IT-specific needs and reduce their average time to resolution of identifying problems by 50%, simply using a tool, because they were able to get people, again, they were able to bring together experts who weren't in the same building together and get them working together on a session that was facilitated by Mural to identify what were the root causes, what were the problems. And again, the employees that were part of this the number was 5,460 on average. What you'll find, and by the way, just a quick footnote, is the number scales up over the 3 years. So I've averaged 3 years for the purpose here of the presentation. When you actually get into the detail of the more comprehensive study, you'll see that there's a scaling that goes on in years 1, 2, and 3. But just having these benefits allowed IBM to avoid an additional almost 50 people that they would have needed to hire over 3 years to accomplish the same work, because they were 50% more efficient. When we risk adjust that comes up to a $3.8 million savings over the 3 years. So bringing all of that together, then, those were the benefits. Now, obviously, using Mural costs something. There is a cost. Now, again, we've talked about the astronomical scale of IBM many times, but the cost of what IBM was paying over those 3 years, and this is including all 3 years, was about $2.3 million for thousands and thousands of design professionals and many thousands of design sessions. In addition, the IBM team built certain templates and curriculum that it was using at a cost of about $350,000 to get started. And then they spent about another $250,000 over those 3 years. In addition, it took 2 weeks of time to adapt and develop for each design professional to sort of change the way they worked and be able to adapt their traditional method to work in a digital platform environment. Again, when you have thousands of people, that still totals about $879,000 to do that work. So again, in summary, Forrester found that, again, we calculated a 495% ROI from using Mural, largely because of the accelerated results, because of the cost savings of avoided travel, and the increased productivity that it made teams more efficient and more effective. And I really appreciate sharing this story, and I look forward to discussing this with you. If you have any follow-up questions, you're welcome to email me. But again, I encourage you to remember that this is an abbreviated version of a deck, and that the more comprehensive study is available from Mural. Mariano, back to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And yes, that will be available. So first of all, Joni, share the new offering, and this is a link to the first impact report that you'll read in the next few days. So tell us more about this enterprise design thinking movement.
Sure. Yeah. So our team has been, over the past several years, of course, working on ways to drive adoption of design thinking in our enterprise, right? And so I shared a bit about that earlier. Lately, what we've been working on is facing that outward as we start to work in this way more with our clients, especially. They're looking for help and enablement and a way to get started using design thinking. So we've started to now turn this as an offering out mainly to our clients right now. I thought I would mention it here because one, there's a link to the study that I mentioned earlier, and two, we're looking for interested companies or individuals to give us feedback, and we're practicing design thinking on our design thinking offering. So if you're interested in seeing the education and resource materials that we've put together to help teams drive adoption of design thinking in their company, then reach out to me, or you can reach out to us through the link there at the bottom of the site.
Great. And again, I've seen, the prototypes of this thing were actually live sessions, right? I mean, they in all of these studios, they run design camps, and maybe you can tell me about that. And again, through training, how many people inside IBM?
So in person, we've worked with about 20,000 IBMers over the past several years. So just coming in for 3 or 4 day sessions, getting some experience, always in the context of a team's own project. We never use kind of abstract examples if we can help it at all. And so the way that we really got things kickstarted was, in those first years, bringing teams through different studios and in with various facilitators to just get some experience practicing. It's we think of design thinking as not something you learn or sort of like get trained on, but as something that a team has to experience and learn together and do together. And so it was really through those first in-person engagements with strategic teams that people started to sort of understand the value that, like, wow, when we get these different perspectives all in one place, and we can take a systems thinking type approach to sort of how we reflect on whatever is the business opportunity or the user opportunity, then people started to see that this is going to help us move faster, and we're getting to better ideas, most importantly. And so that's kind of, starting like that, it made it easier for us to sort of port over to, remote tooling that teams could tap into later.
Yeah, and let me ask you that, because one of the first things I see people asking this workshop is, okay, how do I do this with my team is Germany, New York, and Austin, right? Mm-hmm. So how did you blend the education in person? Because again, I like that you bring everybody together and have that energized session. But I remember that you had towards the end, you told them or taught them like best practice to adapt what they learned in person to go digital. How did you bake that in?
Yeah, well, honestly, it's something we sort of learned over time as we started to introduce lots and lots of IBMers to design thinking. They would always come back to us with a couple of sort of gotchas, or this isn't going to work for me and my team because. And, one of them was always, well, this has been great and this has been a great week, but like my executive's never going to go for this. So could you please, go help that person understand? But right behind that was always, my team, but this has been awesome, but this is not reality. My team does not, this is the first time we've maybe seen each other in a quarter or two. And this isn't we just don't work like this, for good business reasons. Right. And so we started to have to, have an answer, honestly, to help people, we called it for a while. We sort of thought of it as this like Monday morning syndrome. Like you come to a workshop, you've been in it for 3 or 4 days, maybe even a whole week with your team. It's been great. Everybody flies home, and then Monday morning you're sort of like, logging onto email, answering the phone, whatever. And, just kind of the reality of how challenging it is to really change the way that you're working together as a team kind of sets in. And so that's where, like I said earlier, Mural kind of fits in. One of the things that we did is we made, I think Dean mentioned earlier, that we made, some really simple templates that helped teams kind of move through and remind them, what was that activity that we did that was so helpful? Oh, it was when we used a feedback grid and worked together as a team. It's really, you can kind of get swept up in a learning situation and then get home and realize I'm not ready to do this by myself yet. So in that way, I think Mural kind of gave, along with some other materials that we've created over the last several years, it gave us a kind of a support experience for a team that's trying to change how they're working.
Yep.
So the ability to populate those templates was really useful for us, because those sort of serves as training wheels when you're trying to get started.
Totally. And again, we love in-person meetings. But again, it's not a reality of most of us. We also call it workshop amnesia. So we recommend being in person the beginning or certain steps along the project, but throughout the project, it's beneficial to switch from physical to digital, and we're trying to help with that. And the other thing that was mentioned is that, yes, a lot of people go through this, get excited, and then they fade off because of all these logistical hurdles around working in this way. And they don't get to deliberately practice. I mean, you mentioned before that you don't learn this or you don't change this just by learning. You change by doing it, right? So that's the other bridge that we help gap and have people be able to practice what they learned and become masters eventually. And also, mentioning about your program, you have a badging system around people evolving through their capabilities in this space. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So something that we've noticed over time of sort of watching many teams as they adopt and learn how to use design thinking is that there are kind of roles to be played, right? So we've built up 5 different badges that enable an individual or a team, more importantly, to kind of escalate as they learn the practice of design thinking on the project level. And then we're working on right now a couple of curriculums for leaders and for executives to enable them to both lead the change themselves and also to sort of understand their role in it and how to help teams and give them kind of the permission that they need to get moving.
Great. So we're going to be wrapping up in a few minutes, but again, this study is in mural.co/impact, and as Dean said, it provides you with the story, the case, but also a framework for you to use, right? So Dean, any other tips, or Joni, for again the champions, the leaders in this transformation that are still watching us or will be watching us later? How do they convince people to get, again, budget for design thinking, budget for remote tools? How does it? What do they need to do?
Dean, do you want to go ahead? Or?
Oh, I was just going to say, yes, I was expecting Joni to talk first, but I know that in Forrester sense, we're a little more in the research world, but we are certainly finding and have research published that connects customer experience, design thinking, and the results of those activities to financial growth, to market capitalization success, and things like that. So there's not only experience that Joni can share, but there is empirical evidence that is scientifically validatable, if that's a word, that is substantiating this direction. And I would encourage you to tap into that and share that with your executives if they haven't quite caught on to developing a passion for going this direction in your company.
Yeah, I guess, and I would bring it back to just the idea of outcomes again. So one of the origin of our program was really centered on the success that our current design GM had in the business that he brought to IBM. So he was an entrepreneur, and his company was acquired by IBM, Lombardi Software. And I think, leaders around the business didn't actually know that design thinking and these kind of human-centered approaches were at the heart of that offering. But they knew that that's what they wanted. They knew that a better outcome that, users loved was a direction that they wanted to go in. And so you know, I think for us and for other companies, the lesson there is to, you know, work really hard to get even small wins, so that you can sort of demonstrate the impact of bringing design and design thinking into the offering. There's lots of ways you can do that. I know, and you know, one of the ways that you know, before I was working on this team and in this this project, I was working as a hardware designer in our systems business, and something that we did sort of wrong a lot is we didn't staff projects to win with designers and other skill sets. And so I think, you know, something I really learned kind of moving through the transformation that we've been part of for the last couple of years is to, you know, show the contrast, show the difference in your business, even if it means sort of letting a project, you know, fail. It show the contrast between when you bring design and design thinking into the product versus when you don't. And I think, you know, when you do that, leaders can, even people that aren't experienced in design and design thinking, can kind of take a step back and say, you know, that's the one we want versus the other outcomes that we're getting.
Well, again, there's the stories, there's the cases, and now you can also reference, I mean, the IBM Design Thinking Total Economic Impact Report. It's long, but again, Joni shared the brief version. But you can use this to again put in your presentations, and then you can go ahead and download the other study and evaluate how the impact of tooling can accelerate the transformation and can save some on travel and increase productivity. So thank you, IBM, for being a pioneer in all this. And then thank you, Forrester, also for, again, giving change makers a tool to convince the folks that have the budget to let them make change happen. So with that, we'll take off. Again, you can also follow Joni at Joni Saylor in Twitter. Dean shared his contact information before, and we'll be posting the recap of this webinar and the presentation in the next couple of days. Immediately now, you can go and access to the Total Economic Impact Report. Thank you very much, guys, and enjoy the rest of your days or nights.
Thanks, Mariano.
Cheers.
Thank you.